friends, my name is Christopher. In this video I'm going to talk about putting up OSB sheathing and a vapor barrier on the outside of a shed.
Installing vapor barrier is like turning a shed into a mummy.
So this is part 5 of a 9-part series of deep dives for topics of shed building. I hope you have watched the first 4, because if you haven't and you're just starting now, I must seem like a really odd duck. I'm getting progressively more tired as I'm putting these together. Whatever. I have a feature-length video where you can check out the entire build, some fun different shots, and I'll probably sound more coherent when I talk about it. And there's also a 4-minute time-lapse video that you can check out if you need something fun. So let's stop waffling and dive right in. Up to this point, I have been using plans from iCreatables.com. Not a sponsor of this video, I just really like their stuff. So if you need a place to start, go ahead and check out the link in the description below. It's not even an affiliate link, it's just free marketing. Anyways, their suggestion was to build kind of a cheaper style shed and to get sheets of siding, and I didn't want to do that. So I thought, I've got this skeleton of a shed here, what am I supposed to do now? And the next obvious step if you're building a house, well, is to put up your sheathing. And I am using OSB, oriented strand board, chipboard, you'll heard it used before, all this and that. 7/16 of an inch is the most, I believe, common for building a shed, at least for the codes that I was reading in my city. So that's what I went. OSB is inherently waterproof for the most part, right? It's meant to wick water away, so that's cool. So you've got this frame on the outside and you've got all these boards, these OSB boards. I think I had 10 of them to get around my great big perimeter. Does that sound right? Yeah, I got 2 walls of 8, so 4 and 4, and then 2 walls of 12, so 4, 4, 4. Great, that makes 10 boards. Pretty straightforward. Yeah, I can't really go into great detail about this because it is super easy. And again, it's just like doing the floor in part 1, except instead of on the ground, you're 90 degrees up into the air and you're doing it on walls, but from the outside. Haha. So, we've talked about this in the past. You start in one corner, you make sure everything is, plumb and level. You put in a nail at the top, a nail at the bottom, and then your third nail is the most important nail because it locks the structure in place and provides permanent rigidity. So I had to make sure that, not only were the outsides fine, but I had to, when you're putting this great big 4x8 sheet on, even if you've done your job, a good job making sure things are, plumb and level on the outside, they'll still shimmy back and forth, and that will monkey with your square and alignment. So as I'm putting up this board and getting ready to nail in the third board, I just had to make sure the top of the OSB was perfectly flush with the top of the framed wall, because we have been accurate up to this point as much as possible, and then you nail it in. And once you nail that third one in, the wall isn't going to move and you can just go to town nailing the rest of it in. Not a hard process, just not a mentally hard process, but a physical endurance process. Again, my beefcake right bicep, because I was using a 22-ounce framing nailer, or framing hammer, instead of a pneumatic nailer, and I feel very satisfied with it. It was, I think, nail every 6 inches on the perimeter and every 12 inches in between. Didn't use contact cement this time. Why? Because my instructions didn't lead me to believe that I needed to. Anyways, you do that and you go around the outside. Just remember, when you stop one OSB board and you start the other one, they're going to bump up on a joist. Should end here and the next one should start here, so you're nailing both into that 2x4. You have to make sure you're nailing into the 2x4s, because if you're not, well then what are you nailing into? Your wall's not even going to be stable. Doing that for the walls was the easy part. Then I got to the roof. And this was really difficult to do as one person because, I've got a pretty steep slope on my roof. It's a 10/12 and it's already high off the ground. And I'm on this giant ladder hoisting up a full sheet of plywood, 7/16 inch. Great chest press. Get a friend to help you. Otherwise, I had to put some nails in the outside of the top boards where my wall frame was, to shove the plywood on top and then shimmy it down into place to keep it steady while I actually nailed the OSB in. Same process with the walls, making sure the outside is perfect and then getting the bottom line perfect and nailing that third nail in and locking the roof into place, just like we did with the walls, except now you're fighting against gravity in a really difficult way. The roof is similar to the floor insofar as you start with an 8-foot piece, then you cut and you finish with a 4-foot piece, and then the same but in the opposite pattern on the back side, and then you fill it in rotating so your boards don't lay on top of each other perfectly like this. They are staggered. You don't want these seams carrying across because, you know, water will slide down there and it'll create a problem. When you're putting your OSB up around the outside and on the roof, make sure you have an 1/8 of an inch gap in between because your wood is going to expand and contrast with the heat over the year. I just put some nails on in between. They were about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. Proud of that. That was great. Didn't have to worry about a tape measure when I was 13 feet up in the air. Once the roof was finished, I had to get these great big triangle pieces here, my rafters all put together, and I ended up having some OSB that I cut into 2 great big triangle pieces. Anecdote time, I went to my big box store, and it's an outdoor lumber yard now, which is just fantastic to roam around when it's 95-degree heat and it's, you know, a stagnant building. Neither here nor there, but I found a 4x9 sheet of this. And I mean, I'm not a contractor, so sometimes I get really surprised at what material is out there in a beautifully pleasant way, because one 4x9 sheet was perfect for me to fit 4 of these small triangles on to do the end of both of my rafters. I was very, very satisfied, and it was at this point where I edited my original rafter project, and I added this vertical piece of extra stability, a stud for me, for nailing in future boards. So once all the plywood was up, I had a beer. And then it was time to wrap it. Now, this is not something that is required everywhere. Again, check your code. I know a lot of people that would not bother to put a wrap on it, but I thought, you know, everything that I do, I want to do with the shed to increase the longevity of it so it's more stable and attractive and functional for a very, very long time. And having a vapor barrier around there will make sure that it doesn't get as moist on the outside and the wood rots more slowly, or maybe not at all. The vapor barrier was a lot of fun. I've only ever seen Tyvek, so I just call this stuff Tyvek. Anecdote time again, like we call them Kleenexes in our house, but it's actually what, a tissue paper, nose tissue? Kleenex is just a brand, right? It's like Tupperware. Tupperware isn't a thing. Tupper is a brand. It's just a plastic container. Or how about Nook, like what your kids suck on? The pacifiers is what it's called. Nook is a brand, just used colloquially. Isn't that nuts? Same with Tyvek. I thought Tyvek wasn't what the stuff was called, so I went to my big box store and said, hey bud, can you show me where the Tyvek is? I said it a little nicer than that. He says, oh, your vapor barrier, check down aisle so-and-so. And I learned something new that day. Maybe you learned something now too. Anyways, I got Kimberly-Clark brand because they're just up in Neenah, 15 minutes away from my house, so shop local. Kimberly-Clark makes all of your paper products in the world. Wrap this around. My stuff that I got was in 3-foot sections, so I started from the bottom, just making sure it was nice and level going across. When you're putting it in, you can use staples, or you can use these wonderful flat cap nails, which I had a ton of as I was getting ready for the asphalt shingles. So I used those. Make sure you are nailing into your studs. If you want, you can put a chalk line or draw some lines on the outside of your sheathing. I just looked for where I had driven in nails before and used that as a common reference. And I probably missed, 2 dozen of them for the entire shed, but I just went back and put another hole in, and it was just fine. If I made a bad hole on the Tyvek, I used the tape to seal that hole. Once you go around with one big row, you go around the second one and the third, making sure there's a decent overlap. On my vapor barrier, there was a nice line that I could follow. I think it gave me a 6-inch overlap. That seems to be a good number for a lot of things in building. And did you see this fun little trick I did with a extending paint stick and a clamp that helped me keep this great big tube at a level playing field as I'm pulling it out, so I'm not dealing with, holding it up 7 feet in the air while it's on the floor and getting a stupid angle. It's a fun trick. If you want to use it, I hope you do. And yeah, that's it. did it around the entire side and up in the corners. When I had extra, I just threw it up on the roof and tacked it down so it wasn't waving in the wind. I would not do the whole roof with this. I went into a Reddit deep dive of should you put Tyvek on the top or should you use a felt underlay or an ice and water barrier, and my goodness, we're going to cover that in a future video, but it's not the next video. Now that we got the underlay on, it's time to start trimming and doing the siding. And for me, it's beveled cedar siding because nothing is more attractive. And there isn't a decent video on YouTube, in my opinion, on how to actually install that. So this next video should be a pretty good reference point. Until then, let's talk about things that I would have done differently. I would have done a better job actually marking where my studs are, because my studs are for the most part pretty vertical. Some of them bow a little bit, and I said that I put maybe a dozen nails through and they didn't quite hit a stud. I was being lazy. I really should have drawn a chalk line or thrown a marker up and down and did appropriate measurements. It would have just made things a little bit more tidy. And as the vapor barrier goes, I think it's just important to make sure you have a good X-Acto knife. I was using a like a deer knife. Got a real nice one as a wedding gift from a buddy of mine, you know, maybe 8-9 years ago. Sorry, Matt, I forget when you got married. And it's just a good thing for me to use, but an X-Acto knife would have cut through this a little bit better, and it's nice to have on hand because this stuff kind of sucks to rip. So I've got some kind of wonky edges, not so much around here, but you know, you can cover them up. But a nice clean edge is good if you're OCD. And be sure to pull these nice and tightly when you're tacking them down. I suppose I could probably just cut this off now that we're finished, and I got the trim in here and everything is sealed with tape and the like, but whatever, I might leave it. So what did I do right? What did I do wrong that I haven't already talked about? Let me know in the comments below. The best comment I will pin to the top to help others. Remember to be kind. And I hope to see you next time in part 6 when we do the beautiful beveled cedar siding. Until then, take care. Mwah.